This is Brooke, of course, and we are back with our On the Bias series. This is our third one for the 2023 series. So far, we have covered reactance effect and fluency shortcuts. Per usual, I'm going to start today with a story. This is a story about that dang dresser again. Do you remember the dresser I talked about during the first On the Bias post from 2022 about the a.k.a. effect? Well, it's still available online if you want to check it out. But in that post, I shared that it took 2 hours for my dad and I to build the some assembly required, I'm using air quotes around some assembly required, dresser that I bought online, which is why I have a strong emotional attachment to it today. And that demonstrates a little bit of the a.k.a. effect. Another part of that story is that 45 minutes into building the dresser, plank by plank, my dad started to get kind of annoyed. He looked around at all the material we still had left to assemble and said to me, "Aren't you at the point in your life and career that you can buy a sturdy, assembled dresser and have it delivered?" Clearly, he was not appreciating my frugal nature. I also don't think he said it quite as sassy as that, but, revisionist history, right? But he wasn't entirely wrong. I could have opted to spend a little more money in exchange for quality and convenience. But I had already spent money on this dresser in front of us, and we had already finished the main frame of the structure. There was no way I was going to go backwards and start the dresser buying process all over again. The only option was to press onwards and finish the project we started. That dang dresser. So what's happening here? My unwillingness to switch gears and buy a different dresser, or even consider it a realistic option, due to having already invested time and money into the current dresser, is emblematic of the sunk cost fallacy. Here's the definition of that. This is pulled from the Decision Labs website, and there's a link to this in the written version of the post. We commit the sunk cost fallacy when we are likely to continue an endeavor if we have already invested in it, whether it be monetary investment or the effort we put into the decision. That often means we go against evidence that shows it is no longer the best decision. And that ends the quote from the Decision Lab. So in more colloquial terms, it describes those moments when we decide to double down instead of cut bait, even though deep down inside, we know we should pivot. We push ahead because the alternative of stopping or switching feels like we have wasted time, effort, and money already invested, hence the sunk cost aspect, even when it would be the more rational decision to make. When we commit the sunk cost fallacy, we let past decisions guide future direction. Let's try to bring this bias home a little bit. Reflect on a project or a situation you invested time, effort, or money into that reached a juncture where a better alternative presented itself. Your example could be a minor circumstance, like deciding to attend a concert or movie even though you weren't feeling up for it, or maybe the weather was bad, simply because you had already purchased the ticket. Or it could be a more significant, like staying in a bad job because of the time and effort you've already put into it. In these situations, how much did the sunk costs influence your next step? What would it have looked like to ignore the sunk costs as a factor in your decision? Now, a nuance here of sunk costs is that pressing forward doesn't always result in bad news, not always a terrible decision. Maybe the concert or movie you attended was worth the extra effort to get there. I mean, I've had my dresser for a decade and I'm still quite pleased with it, even though investing in a sturdier piece of furniture would have been a smarter and frankly, even a more sustainable choice. There may be a good reason to press forward. But when we fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy, we are only thinking about what we've invested and not about potential benefits ahead. So that clouds our ability to truly weigh pros and cons at critical junctures. As we do in this series, we're going to look at how this bias may help or hurt our behavior change programs. Today, we're going to start with how it may hurt our programs. And let's put ourselves in our audience's shoes. Many of them have invested time, effort, and money into their current habits and systems, even if they are not the most sustainable or time or cost efficient. They already spent money on gas-powered cars and lawn equipment. They have a routine in their household that uses a set amount of energy, water, and food. They've found the best route to work that takes the least amount of time. They've saved enough to finally book that overseas vacation they'd been dreaming about for years. And here we come, advising them to change. This pushes the audience to decide whether they are willing to let go of their sunk costs and adopt a more sustainable and healthier and cost-efficient, etc., path forward, or if they will double down on their current behaviors. And so the sunk cost fallacy helps us understand how audiences struggle with deciding to make a change. They feel an innate pull to consider everything they've invested up to this point in their lives, and a strong desire not to feel like they've wasted that time, effort, and money. Thankfully, the behavioral and social sciences also give us solutions for supporting audiences with making lifestyle changes. So here's a few tips to consider to solving this dilemma for our audiences. Start with a trial or small first step. Instead of asking audiences to completely move away from their current patterns, which will trigger the sunk cost fallacy, we can encourage them to start with one small step, like electrify one piece of lawn equipment, not all of it yet. Or we can ask them to explore an alternative to see how it feels, like try meatless Mondays for a month. So a temporary trial period, see what that feels like. As another tip, we can align the new behavior with the fresh start effect. So it can sometimes feel easier to make a lifestyle change during key milestones, like the start of a new year or a new season. We can coordinate our projects with these moments when audiences feel mentally prepared for a fresh start, and therefore are willing to let go of previous decisions and habits. Thirdly, we can try to reframe it as part of the learning process. So the sunk cost fallacy emerges when audiences feel like they must leave behind and lose their previous investments. We can decrease the intensity of these feels by focusing on the longer journey of change that we're all traveling through, and not shaming the audience for their previous actions. Now, on the flip side of this, how could sunk cost fallacy help our work? Well, it does work in our favor, especially for audience members who have already started on their journey of change. So a slightly different audience segment than before. Making a lifestyle change is hard, and there will likely be times when the audience wants to give up and quit. During these rough patches in the journey, we can be cheerleaders for our audience and remind them of all the hard work and effort they've put in so far. You've made it this far. Let's keep going. Having the ability to showcase the progress and impact they've made to date can highlight their investment and encourage them to keep moving forward. These scenarios are also an opportunity to remind the audience of the longer journey, so they're not discouraged by temporary setbacks and can see the path ahead. So a note of caution here. Sunk cost fallacies impact us as behavior change program managers too. We should be mindful not to stubbornly pursue strategies, interventions, and approaches that don't have a clear path to success. At critical junctures in projects, examine if the team is doubling down on an approach because of sunk costs, when instead you should be looking to pivot to a better option. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed learning about one of the many ways we're wired. I hope that you had the sunk cost fallacy and you decided to keep listening to the very end of today's post. I'm just kidding with that. But do let me know if there's a bias that you're curious about or you want to hear more about. Email me, brooke@brooketully.com, and it may appear in a future version of our On the Bias series. Again, in the written version of this post, there are some published papers to check out if you want to sink further into the world of sunk costs. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.